This video was sponsored by NordVPN, a virtual private network service that provides much needed safety in an age where cybersecurity is more important than ever. And for a limited time, get a special 75% off at nordvpn.com/althist. Humans are the most intelligent species on Earth. We have large brains and a complex social structure, but there's only so much we can do with the cards we're given at the start of a game. Historically, our cities, societies, and way of life were entirely dependent on, well, our spawn point, and people had to make do with the geography and resources at their disposal. But geography wasn't the only factor, historically. In the old world, there was one thing all people had at their disposal: easily domesticated animals. It's almost miraculous that small herbivores like goats, pigs, and sheep even exist at all. And cows, while big, are easy to control due to their herd mentality. With all these animals evolving in the old world, it allowed for humans to easily settle into cities, butchering their new farm animals for meat and receiving nutrients that crops like grain or rice couldn't supply. It's almost like these animals were made to be used by humans, and that's why many cultures inserted those beliefs into their mythologies. But there was always one animal that was special in a way. It was too important and resourceful to simply slaughter for meat. It was different than the goats or cows. The horse. People in Central Asia, a land of endless grasslands, recognized that horses were more useful alive than as food, and they went through great lengths to tame these animals, and even eventually to ride them. Horses are, in my opinion, the most important animal in human history. Simply by them existing, horse travel opened up a new world of potential. They allowed for people to cover distances that would have taken days or months on foot, affecting everything from trade to communication and to war in the process. It made that vast continent of Eurasia far smaller in the process. So what if in an alternate timeline, the horse simply didn't exist? What if there was never such an animal for armies to ride on or for traders to travel on? I know this entire concept seems weird and far-fetched, but strangely enough, it easily could have happened. When I say if horses never existed, I mean if they didn't exist by the time that humans began creating settlements. Horses evolved in North America, not in Asia. They grew into what we would call a modern horse on the Great Plains, and were so successful they roamed throughout the continent, some even going into South America. This all changed with the Ice Age, when the glaciers covered a majority of the continent, limiting the range that horses could travel, and limiting their food supply and their numbers. However, there were paths in the glaciers that could be traveled. These paths were how ancient hunter-gatherers made their way from Asia down south into North America. Some horses and even camelids migrated north in return. Camels are from the Americas as well, which is why we have llamas and alpacas, fun fact. However, unlike the llamas, the Ice Age was the death for North American horses. They were small in number already, trapped in pockets in the glacier, and by the time that humans came, they were simply hunted for food. Horses wouldn't return to the Americas until 12,000 years later, when the horses brought over the descendants of those who escaped. That's actually why horses seem to take so quickly to North America, and those that did escape thousands of years ago simply migrated to an environment that was much like North America, the plains of Asia and the forests of Europe. In this alternate timeline, the horses do not migrate up north. Instead, they simply wither and are hunted to extinction. Perhaps their bones eventually discovered and seen as some strange lost lineage of mammal, like we see the woolly mammoth or giant sloth today. Humans in the modern times never would actually know what a horse looks like. The average person wouldn't own a horse in ancient or even medieval times, so this doesn't change so much, but it certainly changes the communication time between kingdoms. Diplomacy and war are far slower in many places around the world. This isn't universal throughout the world. Some regions which relied less on the horse, like the frozen Arctic or the deserts of the Sahara, would see little change at all. Assuming camels still existed, they'd be useful as long-haul transport animals. Ox could still pull carts, just at a slower rate. But the horse filled a specific niche, a fast, mobile animal for, most importantly, warfare. Even as early as the Bronze Age cultures, horses had been domesticated by Mesopotamians, Hittites, and Egyptians. The chariot was the tank of its day, and it dominated the battlefield. Eventually, when horseback riding became the norm, the cavalry was the decisive factor in battle. It was the best for scouting or for raiding, but most importantly, allowed for the influence of a kingdom to be felt far past its traditional borders. Without the horse, ancient warfare is a slower and also more chaotic affair. Without the threat of cavalry, entire military tactics and weapons never are developed, since there is no need to accommodate for that threat. I'm not going to go into how every single war would have been changed without the use of horses, but I think this one is a good example. The Macedonians turned the Greek world on its head by using cavalry as a fundamental core to their military strategy, using the horses to flank and catch the enemy from behind. This was called the hammer and anvil strategy. The anvil was the solid infantry, and the cavalry was the hammer. Without such a remarkable tactic like this, I doubt Alexander's empire would have reached the heights that it did in his lifetime. This goes for many vast empires who relied on cavalry. In this alternate world, the very foundation of livelihoods for nomadic people like the Mongols, Turks, or Scythians never arises. The grasslands and steppes they felt at home on is now basically their death sentence as a successful culture. The distance from Mongolia to Kazakhstan is short relatively on a horse, but for a human, now that is a journey. People in the center of the continent would be in a position where they are thousands of miles away from not just a main civilization to raid or trade with, but also each other. It's far harder to unify a band of tribes together if they live so far apart. They are now trapped in a vast sea without a boat, and this transforms a lot of early civilizations. The Middle East had a history in the Bronze Age of nomadic raiders conquering the already settled cities, then settling themselves in, transforming the region in the process. These raids were really the only thing that made horse riders relevant and terrifying to the rest of the world. But without horses, they're simply faraway tribal people who have less people for an army. And horses allowed for smaller nomads who shouldn't have been able to win against a large civilization to control the battlefield. So that means in an alternate timeline, there is no Mongolian Empire, no Seljuk Turk invasions, no constant destruction of the Middle Eastern empires from the steppe people, and no Hunnic invasions. There isn't much that can be discussed about this, however, because even the empires affected would be changed without horses. The entire global map would have transformed in the ancient world. The connections of the Silk Road, or the close-knit nature of the Roman Empire, becomes almost impossible to constantly upkeep, since communication is only as fast as a man can run. So the horse was pretty important, you could say. And historically, if there is one thing all cultures agreed on, it was that the horse was something bigger than just an animal. For the nomads of Central Asia, the horse was their world. For the Europeans, a horse was a noble companion in war. The Chinese discovered the Greeks had powerful, or in their words, heavenly horses, and wanted them so much, they fought a war against them for animals. Yes, that is a real thing, look it up. The horse, for all of human history, has always been universally respected. It's an amount of respect that no other animal has really ever gotten. But horses were seen as partners on the battlefield. You relied on your horse to survive. And that's because humans domesticating horses unlocked new potential for civilizations. Horses bore the hard work that humans, even with their brains, couldn't do by themselves until the invention of cars and tanks, which made them relics in a modern war. That's why the horse population has only shrunk in the last century. We shouldn't forget just how much this one single animal existing in the right place at the right time, an animal that was actually from the wrong continent and almost went the way of the mammoth, changed the course of mankind. I don't think we will, because even though these animals haven't been useful outside of ranching for a century, they're still fundamentally tied to even new cultures more than any domesticated animal. Americans still have a fascination with horses, because just like the first horse riders in Asia, this animal made a vast continent just a little bit smaller. And for the natives that fought against it, they saddled up their own horses, and both sides, riding their companions, fought each other on the plains of the West, where the history of the horse first began. This video was sponsored by NordVPN. A VPN is a virtual private network. Basically, what NordVPN does is it secures your information through it whenever you go online. By accessing a private network with military-grade encryption, you can protect yourself. They have thousands of servers from 60 countries that you can access, and with a simple interface, it's easy to set up. Say I want to have a new address in France or Germany. NordVPN allows you to do that, and it works on any iOS and Android phones and Windows or Mac for computer. NordVPN is offering my viewers 75% off a 3-year plan, plus for a limited time, 1 extra month when you use the code ALTHIST. Just go to nordvpn.com/ALTHIST or click the link in the description to sign up. That's nordvpn.com/ALTHIST and use the code ALTHIST at checkout to get started today. This is Cody of Alternate History Hub.